When I first started this journey, I honestly thought that having a great score in the USMLE would be the solution for all my problems. Well, most of my problems. But I really believed it. I thought, oh man, if I just managed to hit it out of the park and score, I don't know, a 260, a 270, that would sure guarantee me a residency spot. But with time I started talking to people, doing interviews with doctors that had matched in all sorts of specialties that now are professors and even program directors. And I quickly realized that my definition of a good score really didn't match reality. And more importantly, that I had overestimated the actual utility of having a good score. And that's why in this episode of A Thinking Person's Guide to USMLE Prep, I just want to delve a little deeper into precisely that, into what is a good score, how useful it actually is, and also at the end give you my honest take on the whole pass and fail change. And to kick things off, I just want to start by giving an upfront conclusion. Just put everything on the table and then start to unpack bit by bit as we move along. And that upfront conclusion is that the USMLE is not a deal maker, it can be a deal breaker, but most of the times it's just a thing that sways the attention elsewhere. So let's unpack that, shall we? First, the USMLE is not a deal maker, and what I mean by that is that contrary to popular belief, having a good score in the steps is really not everything. Because I honestly know that some people argue, that as long as you get good step scores, you're in. Like nothing else matters. And that's just not true. I mean, you literally just have to go and check the NRMP matching data to see that there is a bunch of people that get good scores, which for now let's just say is at 250 plus, that don't match. Depending on the specialty, that can be as low as 10% of the people or as high as 75% of the applicants. But the point is the same. This score is clearly not everything. Now sure, having a ridiculously amazing step 1 score can open a few doors for you and maybe help you stand amongst the crowd and all of that. But in my experience, most of the time program directors just put everyone with a 250 plus in the bag of he or she has a great score. That's it. Like, although a difference exists in paper between a 255 and a 265, in practice, that difference is often negligible, and very few PDs will choose to select an applicant on the basis of having a slightly better score. In fact, in the 2018 Program Director Survey, most PDs admitted that the USMLE was not even in the top 3 factors considered by most of them when deciding how to rank applicants. And not only that, they also gave it a score which was way below stuff like perceived commitment to the specialty, interpersonal skills, professionalism, ethics, and even leadership qualities. So yeah, not a deal maker by any means. However, it can be the deal breaker, in the sense that most programs do have step 1 cutoffs below which your chances of having your application checked become pretty slim. And albeit many PTs are now claiming to have a more holistic approach to reviewing applications, the fact of the matter is that there's simply no way to thoroughly review hundreds and sometimes thousands of applications in a couple of months. They're just way too many. So unless the system changes, the USMLE cutoffs will probably remain a core process in the match. But, and here's the crucial point, those cutoffs tend not to be as high as people think. Again, it really depends on the specialty and most of all on the program, but the average cutoff score is 215. And I'm going to say that again. The average cutoff score is 215. And so if you happen to score below that, or if you happen to strive for a more competitive specialty or program with higher cutoff scores, yes, the USMLE will be a deal breaker for you in that case. But for everyone else in every other scenario, it is simply not. And most of the times, that is for 60% of the people, which is the number of applicants that score between 220 and 249, USMLE scores will just be something that makes the program director look elsewhere. Because again, although in paper a 225 and a 235 look quite different, in practice they tend to be just put in the bag of average scores. And other factors, such as everything we said a few minutes ago, tend to factor in quite more heavily. So with that in mind, what the hell is a good score? Well, it really depends on what you mean by good. If by good you mean the score that won't get me out of the race in most programs, then a good score is 215. If you mean good as good enough to keep me on the average track to residency and enter a good program like most people in the planet do, a good score will be a 230 for non-US IMGs and a 220 for AMGs and US IMGs. If you mean good as the score by which most programs will grant you an interview, that will be a 240. And so good really depends on the metric you use. But at the end of the day, if you really start thinking about this and seeing the statistics, you'll realize that the usual definition that people have of good, which is a 250 plus, is kind of BS. And again, this is not to be interpreted as having a good score is worth nothing. No, I just want to emphasize that the stuff you see on Facebook groups, on Reddit, on all these places that, hey, if you got a 230, say goodbye to your dreams, that is not true at all. 230 is literally the average. It is literally the norm, the score that most people who eventually match have. Yes, maybe it's not the ideal, but those who play it as a bad score have a fundamental misconception of what the typical applicant who matches actually looks like. So what should be your score? Well, if you can, shoot for the stars. The higher, the safer, I think. But as we said, a 240 plus is pretty damn good, and almost no PD will rule you out on the basis of that score. In other words, a 240 will be a score that will work in your favor and not against you, and that will certainly be my recommendation, at least for most people. Now, regarding the whole pass and fail system, what I think will happen is that the extremes will be obliterated. So, as we said before, the usual motif was that good scores could stand out a bit, bad ones got ruled out, and the average ones just swayed attention elsewhere. Well, now all step 1 reports will sway attention elsewhere, and this will naturally shift focus towards the step 2 CK scores. Because remember, as long as the applicants are in the order of hundreds, PDs will need a way to rapidly rule out some of them. With step 2 CK being the only numerical exam left, it seems like the obvious candidate to become the cutoff marker, and that I think will be a consequence for everyone alike. Now, what will happen for the guys in the middle? I mean, for the ones that have average scores? Not much, really. After all, their scores did precisely that, redirect attention to the rest of their application. For the guys in the top, what'll be the consequence? They'll lose an advantage. They'll become a bit more average, but they won't be magically removed from the competition, like some people argue. After all, remember that you don't get higher on the basis of your score, that you still have to check a lot of other boxes. So it's not like we're changing the game and creating a new scenario where everyone needs to work on the other parts of their application, because that was the game we were playing all along. People will need to continue doing what they always did, making their application as strong as they possibly can. For the guys in the bottom, again, they'll become a bit more like everyone else. They won't have such a rough time being ruled out by the step 1 scores, but they will still need to do the step 2 CK, and if they perform poorly, well, the story will be dramatically similar to what used to happen. And in fact, they won't have a chance to show an upward trend, to show how that, hey, yes, I performed poorly in the first one, but then I got my act together and did a better job on the second one. That option will not exist anymore, so if anything else, things will become a bit more stressful given that you only have one chance to prove your, numerical value. However, all in all, I think that the game will look pretty similar to what it is now, at least for the vast majority of people, that is, for around 70% of everyone. Now sure, 30% of the guys at the extremes will need to readjust their strategy, but most things will remain the same. But anyways, that wraps it up for this video. I hope it was useful, and next week we'll talk about the strategy and schedule. But for now, as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.